His wife drained their entire account while he was unconscious in the hospital. She thought he wouldn't make it and started a new life with another man using his savings. What she didn't know, he had just inherited $5 million. The hum of the hospital machines was the first thing Jake Archer noticed when he woke up. That and the dryness in his throat, the kind that felt like you'd been chewing dust for 3 days. But none of that mattered. Not the dull pain in his chest, not the heavy pressure behind his eyes. What mattered was his phone. He reached for it like a man drowning. His fingers, still swollen from the IV, clumsily unlocked the screen. No messages. No missed calls. No notifications from Amber. 3 hours under anesthesia. His heart had literally stopped beating. They sliced through his sternum, replaced a valve, patched up the vessel that nearly killed him, and his wife, the woman he'd built his entire adult life around, hadn't even texted to ask, "Are you still alive?" But there was one notification. Bank of Georgia, joint checking account balance, $0. Jake blinked, squinting at the screen like maybe the numbers would rearrange themselves if he stared long enough. Then he checked the timestamp. 1:42 p.m., the exact moment he was in the operating room. Amber had cleaned them out while he was unconscious. $52,416. 10 years of quiet sacrifice. 1,000 little no's that added up to a bigger someday. No new truck. No weekends in Savannah. No dinners out unless it was 2-for-1 coupons and they drank water instead of wine. And now, gone. Just gone. Jake's chest tightened. Not from the stitches, but from something deeper. A pressure that rose from his ribs, up into his throat, sharp and suffocating. He gasped, his heart monitor beeping faster. A nurse rushed in, asking if he was okay. He waved her off. He wasn't okay, not by a long shot, but he didn't need meds. He needed answers. He called Amber, no answer. He called again. This time the call was declined before it even rang twice. He called a third time. That's when she picked up. And that's when Jake realized just how deep he'd been played. "Well, look who's still alive," she said, laughing. Laughing. Jake didn't speak. His hand trembled, not from the surgery, but from something colder, sharper. "You didn't think I'd wait around for some half-dead guy, did you?" Her voice had a syrupy smugness to it, like this was some sort of punchline to a joke, only she found funny. "Those savings were mine too. I just took what I deserved. And I left." She didn't say where, didn't say who she was with, didn't even ask how the surgery went. She hung up before he could say a single word. For a long time, Jake lay there, staring at the cracks in the ceiling tile above his bed. The IV beeped in rhythm with his heart. Outside the window, the sun was low, casting golden streaks across the white walls. Nurses passed in the hallway. The world kept turning. But inside Jake Archer, something had shifted. Amber had been with him through 20 years of birthdays, funerals, and flu seasons. She'd cried on their wedding day in that small church in Macon, wearing the dress they got on clearance because it wasn't about the price, it was about the love. They'd signed a mortgage together, split bills, shared a pillow. When her bar closed during the pandemic, Jake picked up a second job doing overnight warehouse work just to keep them afloat. He never once threw it in her face, never asked her to pay him back. And now she was gone, along with every dollar he'd saved, every cushion he built, every brick of their so-called future. But Jake wasn't just broken. He was done playing the loyal husband, while someone else rebranded betrayal as fair share. Done being dependable for someone who treated his survival like an inconvenience. He wasn't going to curl up in that hospital bed like some abandoned mutt. He wasn't going to cry, or beg, or wonder what went wrong. Amber thought she walked away with everything. She was dead wrong. Jake Archer had just come back from the edge of death, literally. His heart had stopped. And he came back. The old Jake might have gone quiet, might have blamed himself, but the man lying in that bed now, he was wide awake, and he was going to make damn sure Amber realized one thing. She didn't steal everything. She just gave him permission to start over, with nothing to lose. Jake stepped out of the cab like a man walking into someone else's life. The world felt different now, not just quieter, but sharper, like the corners of everything had been honed overnight. He didn't go home. There was nothing waiting for him there. Amber had left him the shell, but stripped out the soul. Furniture, probably gone. Her perfume, definitely gone. The bank account? He didn't need to check again. Instead, he went to a cheap motel on the edge of town, the kind with parking spots right outside the door and vending machines that hadn't worked since the Bush administration. Room 107 smelled like lemon cleaner and old regrets, but the bed was clean, and the silence? That was the best part. He dropped his overnight bag on the floor, just a backpack with 2 shirts and the hospital gown he forgot to return. He sat on the edge of the bed, fingers resting on his phone, not moving. Something inside him buzzed like an engine warming up. That's when the call came. An unknown number, Atlanta area code. He almost ignored it, assuming it was some collections office asking about a bill Amber had racked up. But something told him to answer. "Mr. Archer?" the voice asked, formal, crisp, a man with a job that didn't allow casual Friday. "Yes?" "My name is Robert Lane. I'm calling on behalf of the estate of Henry Archer." Jake's breath caught in his throat. Uncle Henry? The old goat who hadn't sent a Christmas card since 1993? "I regret to inform you that Mr. Archer passed away 3 weeks ago. You were listed as the sole beneficiary of his estate." Jake blinked. What?" "I understand this may come as a surprise," the voice continued. "Your uncle left behind a considerable portfolio. Real estate, securities, some oil royalties. We're still finalizing totals, but preliminary estimates place the inheritance at approximately $5 million. Jake sat up straighter. The motel walls, the chipped table, the cheap lamp, they all seemed to fade into the background. $5 million? "Yes, sir." The rest of the call was a blur. Instructions about legal paperwork, meetings, signatures. Jake agreed to everything. He would have agreed to sign with his left foot if they asked. When the call ended, Jake didn't cheer, didn't dance. He just sat there, staring at the wall. Amber didn't know. She had taken everything she could see and left behind everything that mattered. He could still hear her voice, sharp and smug. "I just took my part." No, Jake thought. You took the part that was easy to grab. The cash, the cards, the half-used toothpaste, and the TV remote. You left behind the man. And that was the biggest mistake she'd ever make. Jake wasn't planning revenge, not yet. But he was planning something. And this time, he wasn't playing by her rules. Jake Archer didn't go nuclear, not yet. He spent the next 2 days at that same rundown motel, letting the world think he was still recovering quietly, maybe sleeping off anesthesia. But inside that quiet room, something meticulous was forming. He wasn't just healing, he was planning. Amber didn't know about the inheritance. That was his first advantage. She thought she'd drained the tank. She thought he had nothing left to fight with. Let her think it. The motel TV played endless news cycles on mute, while Jake sat with a notepad, sketching timelines and lists. His savings were gone. His marriage was dead. But Jake Archer had always been a man who saw patterns others missed. It was what made him good at contracts, at negotiations, at reading the small print that ruined people when they weren't paying attention. And Amber? She hadn't read the fine print. She hadn't thought about consequences. She thought betrayal came with zero cost, as long as you made the first move. Jake was about to teach her different. On Sunday morning, he drove to a quiet lawyer's office on the north side. It was the kind of place you didn't find on billboards, the kind with wood-paneled walls and serious-looking people who didn't smile unless they were winning. His appointment was with Claire Rutledge, a state attorney, quiet eyes, sharp mind. She'd handled Henry's affairs and clearly knew more than she let on. "Your uncle planned this well," she said, passing him a folder. "You're protected, legally, financially. Nobody can touch this unless you invite them in." Jake nodded. "And that's good, because I don't plan on inviting anyone." Claire tilted her head. "Your wife, is she aware?" "She will be," Jake said, "but not yet." He signed everything, slowly, carefully. When they shook hands, his grip was firm, steady. For the first time since that hospital bed, he felt grounded. He wasn't rushing. He was positioning. That afternoon, he drove past the house, their house. The lawn was uncut, the blinds were drawn, her car wasn't in the driveway. Good. He didn't want to see her, not yet. He wanted her relaxed, comfortable, certain that she'd gotten away clean. He wanted her to believe he was broken. Jake stopped at the diner down the street, ordered a black coffee, sat at a booth facing the window. And that's when he saw it. A sleek silver car pulled into the driveway. It wasn't hers. It was newer, more expensive. And out stepped a man, late 30s, button-down shirt, open collar, comfortable like he belonged. Jake didn't blink, just watched as the man walked to the door and knocked once, then walked in without waiting. Amber didn't just leave him. She replaced him. Jake sipped his coffee. She hadn't replaced him. She'd upgraded in her own mind. But that model? It came with a warranty Jake knew too well. It expired the moment real life kicked in. Jake didn't storm over. He didn't take photos or knock on the door. That wasn't his play. Instead, he texted someone he hadn't spoken to in months. Ben Keller, private investigator. The message was simple. Need quiet surveillance. No confrontation. Full discretion. Cash up front. Ben replied in 5 minutes. Always a pleasure, Jake. Who's the target? Jake sent the address. No names, no details. Just the location. Let Ben find out the rest. Jake didn't want to ruin her. He wanted the truth. And when the truth came out, he'd let it speak louder than he ever could. By Tuesday afternoon, Jake Archer had what he needed. Ben Keller didn't waste time. He'd followed the silver car to a condo downtown, tracked the driver to a flashy office building, and even caught a photo of Amber and her new friend, laughing over mimosas like it was brunch and not betrayal. His name was Travis Dalton, real estate broker, divorced twice, no kids, flashy on the outside, hollow underneath. Ben called him a man who leases everything and owns nothing, including his spine. Jake didn't need the commentary. He needed facts, and now he had them. But that wasn't all Ben delivered. She opened a new account last week, Ben said, sliding a folder across the diner booth. Personal checking, transferred a large sum, probably what she took from your joint account, paid the deposit on a luxury condo in Midtown under her name only. Travis isn't listed. He's just visiting. Jake studied the folder. Photos, screenshots, bank details. The timeline was clear now. She hadn't just walked away. She'd walked towards something fast, with his money fueling the trip. She think you're still in that motel? Ben asked. Jake nodded. That's what I want her to think. She thinks she won. Jake didn't answer. He just tapped the table once. That's what makes this fun. The next day, he walked into the office of Reynolds and Marks, a firm that specialized in high-asset divorce law. He wasn't there for consultation. He was there for execution. The lead attorney, Carol Marks, was sharp as razors and didn't bother with small talk. She filed for separation this morning, she said, sliding a document toward Jake. Claims financial abandonment, that you left her with nothing. Jake didn't flinch. She filed from a temporary Midtown address. No mention of the account she emptied. No mention of the inheritance, obviously. Jake leaned back in the chair. She thinks I'm broke. Carol nodded. Let's keep it that way, for now. Jake handed her Ben's folder. She took over $50,000 while I was hospitalized, transferred it to herself without notice, and then used it to move out. I want that on the record. It will be. Carol laid out the plan. Emergency filing, motion to freeze disputed funds, request for full financial disclosure, quiet, legal, and immediate. She'll be served in 48 hours, Carol said. I suggest you don't contact her before that. Let the papers do the talking. Jake stood. That's the only language she respects. That night, Jake went back to the motel, packed his bag, paid in cash. He wasn't hiding anymore. He checked into a quiet suite near the courthouse, an old favorite from back when life still had structure. Amber hadn't called, hadn't texted. She didn't think she needed to. Jake spent the evening going through files on his laptop, old receipts, tax records, investment statements she never cared to look at. Everything he needed to show the court that he'd been the one building, not draining, their future. Thursday morning arrived with no fanfare, just cold coffee and sharp resolve. Amber opened the door in silk pajamas and full makeup when the courier handed her the envelope. She smiled like she expected flowers. That smile didn't last long. Inside was a full petition for divorce. Attached, a motion to investigate financial misconduct. Attached, a freeze on her new account. Attached, a demand for repayment of stolen funds. By the time Jake sat down with Carol later that day, Amber had already made 6 calls. 2 to Jake, unanswered, and 4 to her lawyer. She hadn't expected retaliation. She thought he'd fade, disappear, stay broken. Instead, he'd flipped the script. "She's angry," Carol said, checking her messages. "She just accused you of manipulation." Jake looked out the window. "She hasn't even seen the real show yet." Jake Archer never raised his voice, not in court, not in emails, not even in the lawyer's office when Amber's attorney tried to paint him as the financially absent husband. He didn't need volume. He had documents. Amber had always hated paperwork. She called it paranoia in print. Every time Jake asked her to review something, she'd wave him off, wine glass in hand, mumbling, "I trust you." And that was the problem. She trusted him to never fight back. But Jake had been preparing for this long before his heart gave out. Months ago, he'd felt the shift, her sudden gym obsession. The late-night girls' trips that came with spa charges and no photos. The quick excuses, the dead look in her eyes when he walked through the door. So he did what Amber never expected. He protected himself. 11 months earlier, Jake had transferred their marital house into a living trust. Quietly. Legally. She'd signed the papers during what she thought was a refinancing round. Her signature was right there, below the paragraph that declared Jake as sole trustee and owner of the property. Amber had never read it, too busy texting someone else, and now it was going to save everything. Jake sat across from Carol Marks as she laid out the next move. The judge accepted the financial protection motion. The court recognizes the property as non-marital. It's off the table. Jake gave a single nod. "She's furious," Carol added. "Says you tricked her." "She handed me the pen," Jake replied. "I just let her believe the story she wanted." Later that day, Jake returned to the house, not to reclaim it, but to remind her. Amber was there, pacing in the kitchen, her lawyer on speaker. Her voice was shrill, unfamiliar. "You can't do this. That house was ours." Jake didn't shout. He laid the deed on the kitchen table. "You signed it over. You didn't read the paperwork. That's not theft, Amber. That's negligence." Her face flushed. "You planned this. You set me up." Jake looked her in the eyes. "I planned for survival. You planned for exit." She opened her mouth, but no words came. Behind her, Travis stood silently in the hallway, watching like a man realizing he just stepped into a room with no exits. Jake turned to him. "You still think this is the gold mine she promised?" Travis didn't answer. He picked up his keys and walked out the door. Amber followed him with her eyes, stunned. Jake let the silence sit heavy in the room. "This could have been fair," he said quietly, "but you didn't want fair. You wanted final." She clenched her fists. "You don't get to walk away like some saint." Jake stepped to the door. "I'm not walking away. I'm walking forward." The courtroom was colder than Jake expected, not in temperature, but in tone. Marble walls, polished benches, and a judge who wore his glasses like a warning, low on the nose, but sharp in focus. Amber sat 2 tables away, flawless hair, designer coat, and a lawyer who looked like she charged by the syllable. Jake wore his one good suit and a tie that still carried the scent of wood polish from his closet. He didn't fidget. He didn't blink. Today wasn't about revenge. It was about the record. The judge opened with routine questions, then asked Amber's attorney to explain why she'd cleared a joint account while her husband was unconscious in the hospital. It wasn't malicious, the attorney said. She believed the marriage was ending. She acted in self-preservation. Jake watched Amber nod, like a student rehearsing lines for a play she didn't understand. Then Carol stood. "Your Honor," she began, "while Mr. Archer was undergoing emergency cardiac surgery, the respondent emptied their shared savings, over $50,000, and moved it into a private account. She then relocated to a luxury residence, accompanied by another man. There was no discussion, no warning, and no justification beyond convenience." The judge looked over his glasses. "Did you know he was hospitalized when you transferred the money?" he asked Amber directly. She hesitated. "Yes." "Did you inform him?" No," she said, her voice brittle. "Why not?" "I thought he wasn't going to make it," she whispered. Jake didn't react. He let the moment land. The judge leaned back. "So you made financial decisions based on an assumed death, before there was even a death certificate," Amber's lawyer interjected. She panicked. She planned, Carol corrected, holding up the timeline. New accounts, a signed lease, a luxury deposit, all within 48 hours of the hospital report. The judge didn't speak for a moment. Then he turned to Jake. Do you wish to make a statement, Mr. Archer? Jake stood, calm, still. No anger, Your Honor, just facts. I spent 20 years building a life with someone who stopped believing in it the moment things got difficult. She didn't check on me, didn't call. She took the money and ran, then accused me of abandoning her. I don't want revenge. I want my name back, and I want this to be over. The room was quiet. The judge nodded once. I'm awarding full possession of the marital home to Mr. Archer. The funds removed from the joint account are to be returned in full. Further proceedings will determine the remainder of asset division, but based on the evidence, this court sees a clear pattern of financial misconduct. Temporary orders will be filed today. Amber's shoulders dropped. The performance was over. As Jake left the courtroom, she followed. Jake, wait. He paused, just once. I made a mistake, she said. I panicked. I thought that I'd die, he asked. She didn't answer. Jake looked at her, really looked, for the first time in months. She was still beautiful, still composed, but something was gone. The illusion, the control, the power. I did die, he said softly. At least the version of me that needed your approval. He's gone. He walked away. 1 month later, Jake stood outside a brick building with a new sign. The Archer Foundation Recovery for the Undone. A nonprofit clinic, funded by the inheritance she never saw coming, for people rebuilding after betrayal, illness, or loss. The kind of people who, like him, were never really broken, just underestimated. He didn't need Amber's apology. He had something better, closure, and a future built on truth, not illusion.